All right, let's have it.
Hey, everybody. Whoa. I got to warn you now. Okay. I know my cohort in crime here. I'm Rauel LaBreche, by the way. That's Rauel, like Rauel. Remember? Because if you ever meet me in person and you say Rauel, things aren't going to start out well. Okay. So, in that conversation, but Rauel LaBreche, one of the hosts here of Coming Together. So, frame of reference, Coming Together. And, you can't do coming together unless you have somebody to come together with. So my co-host here is a man that we've known each other for well over a year. We're into our second year at least, aren't we? Or are we more than that?
Yeah. Well, we've been doing this for over a year now together, okay. But we actually met Salt County Institute of Leadership.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where we actually met, and that was about 3-4 years ago.
Yeah, something like that. We met at one of those meals or one of those luncheons that they did, I think. And yep. I was crazy enough to say, hey, I got this idea. What would you think? And you jumped on it, and I forgot to ask, who are you again? What's your name? I keep forgetting to ask.
Yeah, my name is Antowan Hallmon Sr.
Oh, yeah. That's right. Forgive me. So for now, is it Antoine with a whole bunch of N's? I forget now.
Just Antowan, just how it sounds. Of course, people they'll spell it however they choose to. But yeah. It's just Antoine.
My dad's name was Antoine, but it was the French version, Antoine, and that was too hard for the person that did the birth certificate when my grandpa came in. Was very French, French Canadian. He had a very thick accent. He was like So, and the woman is just like, what the heck is he saying? So she made it Anthony, and then he changed it to Antoine. So, and was known as Twen, Twen, all his life. So, you got an Antoine. I mean, we got some history together, man. So anyway, so today's topic is, what is it that you presented the topic today? So you get to introduce it.
Oh, yeah, man. Today we're talking about the SAVE Act, the Safeguard Americans Voter Eligibility Act. Of course, in Congress, it's H.R. 22. And, of course, man, this is a federal bill, man, that would require voters to present, documentary proof of U.S. citizenship, and, of course, in order to, and basically, we're looking at this, it is what it is. Of course, on the surface, it's like, oh, we're fighting voter fraud and things like that. But actually, what it is a way to legalize voter suppression. Of course, and the thing is, they mark it as a measure against voter fraud. But again, let's just be clear with voter fraud. It doesn't really exist. There's been very, very minimal documented data, as well as official investigative measures that show that this is almost non-existent. And even in those cases that there were some form of a clerical error, and of course the impact of what they're trying to do is to systematically exclude millions of eligible voters in America by creating these dangerous precedents about what it's just a poor policy making, man. They want to undermine the confidence of existing secure systems and just basically tear away at the foundation of U.S. democracy by placing by making it harder for Americans to participate in this democratic process.
Yep.
Of course, and the thing is, with this SAVE Act, man, who is it going to affect the most? It's going to affect Black, Brown, Indigenous, immigrant communities, man, who already have a lot of hurdles to come over to get, legal documentation of their existence, and of course, but this SAVE Act, again, is trying to just basically, they want you to provide proof of citizenship.
Yep.
And then, of course, and how this
documentary proof,
So. Documentary proof in person, meaning that there's no more online registrations and things like that. They want you to provide like your birth certificate, your naturalization certification, or a U.S. passport, which a lot of people just don't have access to. And we were talking about this some time ago, man, where, one of the ministries that we do at FaithWorks Ministries, and what we're going to be transferring over to the Humility Inc. side of things is we help people get their driver's license and IDs and birth certificates so that they can become employable, thus making them more self-sufficient.
Right.
However, in our processes, what we do and what we found is, like, say you take now 65 years old. I wouldn't say that's old, but when you're trying to
I agree
retrieve, I know that's where you are. But like when you talk about, like, say someone born in Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and certain parts of Florida, it's hard to get their birth certificate because what these municipalities and these counties have done over the years. Of course, a lot of them have been annexed into bigger places.
Yep.
So what has happened is a lot of birth certificates and other life identifying documents have been misplaced, discarded.
Yep.
And then, of course, they're saying, oh, well, in the process of this annexation, one town merging with another town, or in the process of digitizing these things, the documentation being lost. So when we go to look for...
Or burned up in a fire, for goodness sakes.
Or burned up in a fire, exactly. Yeah. And when we start to try to dig up someone's birth certificate, man, we can't find it. And you talk to a city clerk or town clerk, it's like, okay, how do we get... This person is walking around... A human being is walking around basically non-existent.
Yeah.
And of course, me personally, I say there's another layer to this because, as these local municipalities, local city-state governments are being, taken over by conservatives and things like that. I can't help but believe that a lot of these things are intentional and deliberate, with the misplacing, destroying of life documents.
Yep. Well, and remember, too, one of the other things that's required as a form of proof is a U.S. passport. Well, you can't get a U.S. passport unless you have birth certificate. So that, that's a prerequisite for that document. So two of these things are actually intimately linked to one another. And then the other thing they're allowing for is enhanced driver's licenses. So, which there are very, very few states right now that allow for that. And that basically has a code on them or like a special little symbol on them that also says, okay, this person has been checked with a birth certificate that, has proven that they are in fact a U.S. citizen and, everything is hokey dokey that way. And that speaks to more of a practical problem. There's two practical problems I want to deal with. Not only is the issue of these documentation problems, but even if your documentation does still exist, you can't go to a county clerk's office in the evening. You can't go to them on the weekend. They usually have pretty prescribed hours, like 8 till 4. Sometimes, 8 till 4:30, some places 9 until 4 or 9 until 4:30. Well, guess what? Most of the people that would have these issues have jobs. So how are they supposed to get there during those daytime hours, right?
Even if they try to go on their lunch break,
right?
The clerk's office is closed between noon and 1:30.
Exactly. So unless you know ahead of time, right, where that's going to happen. And, so you're talking about people that are already, in a lot of instances, kind of fighting for, just survival, living from paycheck to paycheck. I've been there. I know you don't want to be taking PTO for doing something like this if you don't have to, because that's time you can't just relax. You're, waiting in a line or whatever. If you're in a bigger city, good luck getting that done in less than 2 hours, just because of the number of people that are usually there, for whatever reason, they're able to get off, or I don't know how that ends up being busy. Sometimes it's just because it takes so long with each one that all you need to have is 6 people and all of a sudden you're way behind. So there's the practicality aspect of that, which again, you have to believe. It's very difficult to not believe that that's part of the thinking through of this process. Hey, let's do it. So you have to have these particular documents, and then let's make sure that we end up having it during the most inconvenient times for most of these people that we're pretty sure are voting against us. Okay. Then the other thing that really, really gets at me is I looked up how much it would take. So this is we are talking fraud. Right. So fraud, in order for that to happen, you'd have to have like a fake ID. Okay. So I looked up fake IDs. How much does it cost on average to get a fake ID? And we're not talking, going down to the store, having some kid that prints them out and then, pastes your picture on, like Hollywood would end up, making you think that that would be okay. Maybe in the 60s you could get away with that. But today, if you've got a real license from a real place, a certified license or a passport, it's going to be, you're going to have some pretty sophisticated equipment. So it costs, I looked up, costs between $1,100 and $1,400 to get a fake ID or fake identity. If you're going to go all that way, get a fake identity altogether so they can't trace it to you, because that would be the smart thing to do. Anyways, so these people that are faking, if they exist, are putting a really significant chunk of change in order to make that falsity work at the level that it needs to work for this to happen. I'm sorry, but that seems pretty dumb that you could expect that that's going to happen on a widespread scale, unless of course Elon Musk is funding it and saying, come to this rally and we'll give you all, we'll have a booth set up where you can get this made, and we'll cover the cost, right? Can't you see that happen? Maybe George Soros would get behind that, huh? Everybody seems to love to hate old George. So then I just looked and thought, I talked with friends of mine that run the voter, booths or here in town here. We're a little tiny town, Prairie du Sac, Wisconsin, 4,000 people. Okay. So if at this level of our town, when you go to vote there, you have to have a picture ID. They still accept driver's licenses. So, because we know how easy those are to fake too these days with all their, holographic imagery and, the pictures that are sealed under lamination. And, now there's even another special symbol in there that's clear. And if you turn it around, it's holographic, right? There's symbols that are printed over in the lamination. Our Wisconsin IDs are pretty dang sophisticated and hard to reproduce. But, if you got $1,400 laying around, not a problem. Anyway, so you got to present that ID. They look up on a computer. They're linked into a state system to be able to, and I believe it's national for the national elections they do, checks into that system. They try to find that same name, and they hold on to your license so they can make sure they get the right spelling. They find your name on their register, and when they verify that you're that person, they check it so that it becomes locked. That name becomes locked. You can't vote again somewhere, anywhere in the state, because that thing is locked. So, right. So there's an issue, right? So, and then once you do that, then you have to go to another table where they have a printed log, a roster of all the people that are registered to vote, pre-registered to vote in this area. And they check to make sure you're in there. Two different people check. They have two different lists to make sure that there isn't an error in one of the lists or that somebody checked the wrong name, previously, because there's so many Smiths in the world, or in our case, in this community, Breinigs, right? There's a bazillion and one Breinigs. Those people are good Catholics. They reproduced a lot of folks. Anywho, I digress. But they double check that before they give you a ballot. So then you take the ballot and you do, your thing and vote for who you want to. And then there's a little computerized thing that, it looks like kind of like a copier that you can only scan in one way. If you scan it in the wrong way, the machine says, dude, put it back and put it in the right way. And you put that into that form. It's not like it puts it in a chamber where you can get at and run it a couple of times through. Once it's in there, it's in there. And that, again, it's hooked into the internet and locked down to be able to vote just one time with that piece of paper. That piece of paper is coded with a barcode so that it can't be, reproduced and run a second time, checked against a roster, computerized. Okay, so if there's huge amounts of fraud going on, that means you have to have some sort of very sophisticated computer technology and computer capabilities in order to futz not only with those machines, but futz with the records that are kept on these systems.
It'll cost more to commit fraud than to actually get your real ID and passport, etc.
Right. So who's doing this? You want to talk about conspiracy theories? They're always given, the folks that are, liberals spouting off that this isn't, blah, 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 or, we stole the vote, all that jazz. This is more would require some serious, covering of your not only back end, but your tracks to be able to see where the digital footprint is that caused these problems. Much more likely to be a state-funded kind of thing. So if that's the case, that Russia or Iran or the people that want to see us, screw things up, if they're funding that kind of sophistication, and I'm not saying they couldn't if they really had sophisticated enough programming. Okay, then that means that our elections are in fact corrupt, and that whoever wins that time, either they didn't do a good enough job in Iran or Russia to be able to really influence things, or something. Anyways, I say all that because in just talking through that system, it's kind of crazy. It's just crazy to think that there aren't other ulterior motives going on here in this whole thing, because the law does state that the bill states that those who register to vote by mail, which, all during COVID, all evil took place, nothing but evil, because people couldn't go to vote, all of a sudden this voter fraud started happening, which, by the way, probably helped Republicans more than it helped other people, because a lot of the folks that were doing that were in nursing homes. Right? They were the most vulnerable citizens to COVID. So they were the ones that were given the opportunity to vote by mail. And if they think that the majority of elderly people are voting for Democrats, I have a hard time believing that. I would think at best it's an equal split between, right? So they shall not be registered. If you're going to vote by mail, you shall not be registered to vote in an election for federal office. Doesn't say anything about states, because they know they can't pass it through states, but through federal office, unless that documentary proof of United States citizenship is presented in person. Well, guess what else is under attack right now? Natural born citizenship. So something that is constitutionally prescribed since the beginning of the foundations of our nation in the Constitution is being challenged, because once they would get this passed, once they get through this, they have this two-tiered approach going on, where they're going to also take away that privilege of being a United States citizen if you've been born here in the United States, which has been, they could probably go back and say that, Obama wasn't legitimately a president. So anything, he did, because, he apparently never provided the proof, which he did. It's just it's unfathomable to me that people are not realizing that there's such a dearth of information that is not being held out there in the open, and they are taking advantage, folks. They are taking advantage of people that are ignorant, not stupid.
Absolutely.
Not stupid. Okay. Let's be careful of calling people stupid, because no one likes to be called stupid. These are smart people. Even if they're, working class MAGA folks, they're smart people, but they are ignorant. They don't have the time. Oftentimes they're working, check to check, hand to mouth kind of thing. They don't have time to do this kind of research, and they frankly wouldn't know how to do it. So, and that's part of, I went to college. I got a graduate degree. There's one thing you have to learn when you're going after those degrees is how to do research and how to ask questions and how to make sure that you are able to critically think about things. They don't get to do that in high school. Heck, in high school, you're lucky to get through reading, writing, and arithmetic, right? It's because of the things that are just necessary to get through to graduate from high school. So it's such a multifaceted, such a complicated attack on things that we need to get educated in it so that we can present the information and have sources, multiple sources to go to. Because that's the other thing. Why do you think fake news became such a big deal? Why is that such a constant talking point? The fake news, the fake news, the fake news, the fake news. And you think, well, of course they got to do that, because then anyone who's trying to do true journalistic endeavors, that's trying to verify sources, triple verify sources before they publish anything, those people are going to be just called fake news. And because now you've gotten a huge segment of society to believe that there is such a thing, and yes, There has been such a thing since the beginning of time. I would say that Mad Magazine was fake news, because if you didn't know that Mad Magazine was parody and, just being done as kind of a fun way of kind of looking at things and saying, isn't this silly? But it did have some truth in it. You could call that fake media. So they really, you got to give them credit. They are really doing this smartly. So get people, do whatever you can to just ask them to think, because they're not going to get it from their sources of media. You've said it multiple times, Antowan, get out of your news bubble, challenge your beliefs, challenge your biases, because that's the only way any of us really learn. I'm willing to accept that it is important to verify. It is important to make sure. But holy Jiminy's, Batman, if you can't look at our process right now in Prairie du Sac, Wisconsin, and think about all the steps you already have to go through, what the heck are they worried about? A fraudulent mail going in? I mean, for goodness sakes, a birth certificate is easier to fake than a passport or a driver's license, which is required now. I do not get it, folks. I simply do not get it that we don't think about this more. I don't.
Yeah, man. It's unfortunate that majority, I'll say, close to whoever voted in the favor of the current administration, approximately 80 million people. I can't help but just simply say they have fallen under the spell of a form of dark psychology, man, with the gaslighting, blame shifting, the projection, the flat out manipulation. A person does a really horrible thing and then make you question your reality, make you question your thought process. And that's what, in flat out, some people are just, along with the brutality and the cruelness of this administration, some people just love it. They love the cruelty of it, but not realizing how this affects them. With the SAVE Act, man, of course, when we're talking about, the requirements, the documentation that's needed, who was affected, of course, here in Wisconsin, they were giving us up until I think we got till early May to have our real ID. Like you were talking about, like Wisconsin IDs have gotten so sophisticated now that, this real ID is required for travel now. And of course, and it's funny how like they're saying like to show documentary proof to vote in federal elections, is I had to show a birth certificate to get the real ID. Mm-hmm. So why wouldn't, because now they're saying that the real ID is not valid or a military ID is not valid unless it's paired with additional documents like a birth certificate, naturalization certificate, or a passport. But keeping in mind that you need a birth certificate to get one of the above things. And so it's just another hurdle. It's a deliberate attack, man. The impact on marginalized rural and communities of color, man, is just out. It's just crazy. Of course, a lot of communities, man, we don't have access to these required documents, and of course, like we're just talking about, the cost involved in even getting them. That's why one of the reasons that one of our ministries is to help people get their IDs and things like that, their birth certificates, to help them become employable and more self-sufficient. But now the primary focus is so they have the vital records necessary to vote. Mm-hmm. And of course, when we're talking about, this whole thing, it's like now you can't, you have to do this. You have to do all of this in person. Now, if you're a rural person, if you're living in a rural area, how far do you have to travel to get to a office to present these documents if you have a ride? And I'm going to use this as an example. 75, 80-year-old white lady, live alone. She participates in a democratic process by voting by mail, but you're telling her she voted for this administration, but now she's starting to see how the thing that she voted for is affecting her. Because again, these things are targeted, but a lot of people thought, these things won't affect me. I can vote in a certain way. I could do these things. I'm voting for this particular administration because their economic policies or their policies on immigration, quote unquote, but it's again, now they're starting to really see how these things affect them, because not only is it this thing affecting people of color, but it's affecting married women, married white women. Now it's like, just think if you're your marriage, your birth certificate says one thing, and your state ID has your married name on it. Now you got to go and dig up your marriage license. Here in Green Bay, one of our pastor friends, her husband passed away about 4 or 5 years ago, and now, of course, with the as we start to move towards the requirement of having this real ID, she went down, and of course, her married name is one, but her birth name is another. She had to go through years and years of documents to find her marriage certificate, and of course, and just think about this, a lot of, again, in rural, marginalized, poor communities, think about how often you have to move for one economic issue or another. You have to move. You have to pick up and move. And in the course of these transient times and transient spaces, documents are lost, birth certificates are lost, marriage licenses are lost. And it's like, and just flat out, hey, over time, you forgot where you put it. And then, of course, it's just these things where it's like these deliberate hurdles put in place to impact certain groups of people, and this includes white women. And then this is where it's like, okay, we really gotta, like you said, it's like we have to really start calling light to this. We see this big thing on the surface, but there are so many things undercurrent that are going on. Of course, like just talking about the discriminatory impact on women, it's just like, it's basically telling you, hey, I don't trust you to participate in a democratic process unless you can prove that who you are, and it's just outlandish, and it's just it's basically legalizing voter suppression is what this is doing. If we're not careful, it's targeted racism. You're trying to deliberately disenfranchise tens of millions of people. Approximately 21 million Americans lack the proper documentation to get the information required for the SAVE Acts. Many of, and keep this in mind, like you said, you made this point. Many of them are already registered voters, but however, if coming in these upcoming elections, if they can't provide if it makes it through Congress, which we have to be in Senator Ron Johnson's ear saying, hey, don't vote for this, because it went through the House really, really fast.
Yeah.
It wasn't even talked about. It just came to the floor, boom, and all of them voted for it. Now it's in the House, is in the seat of the Senate to vote this thing through. So we got to reach out to our senators and say, hey, no, we don't like this. We don't like that. Because again, even though it was targeted at one group of people, but you start to see how it affects everyone. Again, like we saw that last week, a couple weeks ago with the hands-on movement. Of course, a lot of people, when they really start to come out of their news bubbles and see how the actions of this administration are really starting to affect them, i.e. Their Social Security, Medicaid. You saw a lot of people of all nationalities out in those lines because they say it affects them. And it's unfortunate to say, you saw some white farmers saying, even with the cutting of USA, they say they'll still vote for him. And but again, man, just when we're talking about this SAVE Act, we really have to stand up against it. We have to speak out against it. We have to bombard Senator Ron Johnson's doorstep and his phones and telling him, no, if you vote yes to this, you are not representing us. And of course, but that's it's a bad thing, requiring people to try to be in person and then not having any kind of online or mail-in alternatives. This thing is designed to exclude, not to protect voting rights. It's to exclude people from voting. And of course, when they do this, they try to weaponize bureaucracy, maintaining the racial hierarchies of the electoral process, right? Because again, it's funny how this current administration says, hey, we're trying to cut out bureaucracy by cutting all the heads of these the EPA and USDA and the CDC. They're cutting all these bureaucracies, but they want to create one when it comes to voting.
Right.
And so these people, they can't have it
Or
both
revenue,
ways,
the
man.
External Revenue Service, right? If
Yeah,
you can
yep.
cut that off, then you got all kinds of ways to, get rid of things that now you got to balance the budget because we're not charging you income taxes. We're your saviors. We're not charging that. Oh, there is going to be a service fee for using Internal Revenue Service, though, just so you know. It's just not going to be tax free.
And like you said, brother, it's like under the guise or under the banner of election security, they strip away the rights of eligible voters, undermining the trusted programs that we already have in place. But it also it'll like say again, going back to like saying having to have these various forms of ID. Mm-hmm. If you don't have these various forms of ID, they'll criminalize that process. They'll try to criminalize that discrepancy in your documentation. Like say a married woman going to vote. If she don't have her marriage certificate, her birth certificate, and her ID, if all three of these things have to match up with current addresses and XYZ and all these different things. But if they don't match up, they're gonna try to charge you with some kind of voter fraud or they want to have many documented cases of voter fraud on record to justify this whole thing. And so they're going to create cases of voter fraud. And the thing is, when you dig deeper, you'll see that they're not voter fraud. They'll just be simply saying, hey, what the actual ideology, what the actual case will be is simply, hey, I don't have the access to get the documentation that is needed for this. Right. But, of course, if they're talking about trying to put the SAVE Act in place, man, it'll codify voter suppression, man. This is just one of those things, man. We just cannot let sit.
Yeah.
We people, and this is people, all races, all colors, all religions, all political affiliations. It affects everybody. Because again, and again, man, just I'll say this and I'll yield. It's just a lot of people voted for this administration, man, because they say, oh, it was his economic policy or his immigrant policy. I have a firm belief that people vote for people based on what they do. And of course, people are seeing what this man has done, even in his first term. He is a blatant racist. He hates people. Let's just say it. He hates people.
Humiliates anyone that stands against him.
And he's very cruel. Yeah. He's very cruel. And people love the fact that other marginalized groups of people are going to be held under a hammer or under a thumb or just be like, what's happening in immigration right now. This is just cruelty, man. It's borderline. It's actually, I'm gonna say it's inhumane. Like, what's going on. But the thing is,
they are smashing people's windows in their cars, smashing them
did you see
with
that
sledgehammers
yes.
and pulling people out of their cars. I mean, and shoving them into vans. And I mean, it is ridiculous. And we are letting it happen. We're letting it happen.
People have voted for this, mm-hmm. But now they're starting to see how it actually affects them. And again, we here at Frame of Reference coming together, we're not only calling this thing out, but we're also trying to create a safe space for people to come and say, hey, I was wrong. Let's come to the table and see how can we start to combat these things. Right. And that's what we're trying to do here. Create a safe space to say, hey, I was wrong. How many times have you and I both said, hey, I was wrong about that?
Oh, man, come on. I'm wrong more than I'm right. Ask my wife. She'll tell you. Gee, or my kids. Goodness gracious.
But yeah, man, this legalized voter suppression. And again, man, it's the cost of even hosting elections are going to go up. There's so many bad things that are going to happen with this act if it goes through. And we just have to fight. We have to fight with the right heart's posture. Being Christians, of course, we don't repay evil with evil. We overcome evil with good. We just have to, we can be bold. We can even be loud, but we have to keep the right heart's posture. Yeah. And when I say right heart's posture, we're standing, we're living according and acting according to God's biblical principles versus our own personal preferences. And that's where, we will win this thing. Love will win. I encourage people to go back and watch my sermon for February. Love will win, because it addresses a lot of these things as far as racial unforgiveness and all these different things. But yeah, this act, instead of solving a voter issue, it'll actually create a voting crisis.
I I'm kind of getting more cynical as I get older. I do believe, I've read to the end of the book, and I do believe that there is the story turns out fine. And the reality is, though, I don't know if we're in the tribulation right now or if that's yet to come, if it's, hard to imagine, but, is it going to get much worse before it gets any better? I just don't know. So my cynicism takes over in that I want to be prepared. And it's hard, honestly, it's hard for me to believe that we can win this battle, just because in our state, in Wisconsin, and in the national, Congress, the Democrats have a majority. So the way that we're going to win is by getting the Democrats that are the majority, getting enough of them to believe that, okay, go ahead, vote for this, but you're not going to get in office again. So, if you're ready for that, and at that point, then, does it all get turned around? Potentially, it could get turned around when you've got a different administration in, but the key will be whether or not you can get a different, administration in. So they are recognizing that they've got a pretty short window here to get this passed. Because if they don't get it figured out by 2026, it's going to be, it's going to be hard for them to ever get it to happen.
This has been the most hardest 100 days of any presidency to this point.
Yep.
And of course, and like I was watching one news show, and they were just saying how these people, they're actually, everything they're doing is just test runs, the deliberate disobeying of judicial precedences and things like that. Mm-hmm. They are testing the waters, man, because they're in this first 100 days, they're testing the waters because, again, if we're not careful, we got 4 more years of this, man. If
not
we're
more,
Lord willing,
if not more, right? So my point in all, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, man. Again, this whole thing is designed to frustrate people out. They threaten people out of participating in democracy, but they also want to frustrate you out of participating.
Right. So my encouragement, where my cynicism gets encouraged, is I want to think beyond what they're doing right now. I am tired of doing nothing but reacting to what Trump does, to what his administration is doing. I am sick and tired of it. And as an actor at heart, I know the difference between actors and the rest of the people that I know. Actors and artists in general, we know how to innovate. So let's stop chasing the tail, because these guys are the tail end of humanity. They are the butthole of humanity. Nothing that is coming out of them is nothing but shit. Okay, I'm saying it because Antowan can. He's a minister. I get that. So I am the voice of vulgarity here on Frame of Reference coming together. But it is nothing but shit that is coming out of this butthole of an administration. So I'm probably going to get taken away by the NSA for having said that. But the reality is that
we on the list, man.
Right. Well, and hopefully they won't wipe out this podcast before it gets to the right people. But so if you can adopt the philosophy that, okay, do what you can, do what you have time for to call senators. But in our state, Ron Johnson, he's not going to listen to me. He's already accepted that he's not going to win an election with my vote. So what does he care what I think? The number of representatives that are Republicans that have gotten their butts chewed by having their town meetings, which they're supposed to have with their constituencies, they're now dialing in, right? Where was the place where they actually had a cutout, a life-size cutout of the representative, and then he phoned in to the thing. So it's like, are you kidding me? A cutout representative that's a paperboard thing, their foam core, person, and then that's supposed to suffice for, I couldn't make it here, but I sent my foam core dummy, So here they are trying to avoid any direct conflict with people in contact with anybody that might, differ with their opinion. So they are hiding under rocks to avoid doing that. So can those guys be convinced enough that, okay, do you want to try to take the chance that you're not going to get into office? And the only thing that makes sense to me that they are banking on is that it won't matter what these people think, because by the time 2026 comes around, they're not going to be able to be voted out. So we have two strategies from what I can tell that we can utilize. One is now mobilize, just like you are, Antowan. Mobilize so that you can help as many people as you possibly can to get legitimate IDs. You know, if they're homebound people that have done mail order, figure out now how you're going to get those people not only to voting stations, but how are you going to get them these legitimate, types of ID so that they can vote. Get that figured out and figure it out now, because you've only got until 2026 to do that if this damn thing passes. Okay. So that's number one. Mobilize for that now. Forget about what he's going to do tomorrow to piss you off, because he's probably got a Post-it note board or bulletin board that's the size of Miami, that they're just putting things up to it and saying, okay, which of these things will get the most people upset so that we can distract them from what we want to do. And it'll be like magic, right? It'll be magic that they will watch them just scurry like about a bunch of bunnies in a hat, right? It's just, it's so obvious that that's what's going on. And we are stupid enough to fall for it. We are stupid enough to continue to respond to his idiocy of the Gulf of America. Come on, who gives a rat's butt right now? If he wants to call it that, fine. I got bigger battles. Like, how am I going to get these people their legitimate documentation that they need in order to be legitimate voters? So get that figured out. Okay. And then the other thing that just gets me is that we need to start figuring out what our agenda is if we don't pass this stuff and 2026 does end up being the last straw. I don't think it can be the last straw. I think we better be strategizing now what either the protests or the actions that we're going to take as a country of people that want a civil, want a compassionate, want a diverse, equality-driven, inclusively driven society that says, you know what, I don't agree with transsexualism. I don't personally, but I'm not going to tell you that you're going to hell because you do. That's not my place. Right. I am not God. Okay, God gets to make that judgment. And if he looks at the heart of a person and decides that, you know what, that was earthly stuff. We're not, you love people. You love people. You were compassionate. You help people around you. Enter the kingdom, right? Mm-hmm. I don't know. It's not my job to know that stuff. And I will fight to the finish with anyone that tells me they're going to hell. Oh, yeah? When did you become God? Huh?
Exactly.
When did you become God? I would like to know, because if you're going to sit there and point to scriptures that say that that's true, I can point to one, if not two, if not three other scriptures that tell you to put that in measure, to put that in a perspective that has to make sense with that other thing.
Exactly, man. People cherry pick. Yep. People cherry pick scriptures to fit their motive. When God came off of the mount, man, in Exodus 34:6, he came down and told in person. He came down and told us who he was. Yeah. He was a gracious and merciful God, slow to anger, steadfast and everlasting love, meaning he loves us all, regardless of our lifestyle, political affiliation, race, color, whatever. He loves us all. And again, like you were just saying, man, we have to stand up for every right, because, again, a lot of people aren't even familiar or haven't even heard of this thing that is what we're talking about today. A lot of people haven't even heard of it. Because like on Fox News, they're not going to say too much about this because, again, they don't want to bring light to what, because, again, when people really get the gist of this, they'll know how much it actually affects them. Or
they bought the lie that it's corrupt, or we have corrupt elections. We have to do something because there's no way Trump could have lost to Biden. No way.
Yes, because, and again, like, man, again, just these people as a whole, man, when we talk, because these people tomorrow, I'm just going to say this. I'm just going to say it. They're going to allegedly celebrate the risen Christ with foul hearts. And when he says, you honor me with your lips, but your heart be far from me, that is what it is. Because, these people, they're saying they're Christian, but they're these acts of hate, man, these acts of racism, these acts of suppression, these stripping away of rights. And again, you do it all under the guise of voters electoral safety or whatever. And then this SAVE Act, man, it's not a step towards stronger elections. It is basically institutionalized voter suppression. Just legitimized by law. We gotta reject this SAVE Act. Because it masquerades as some type of reform, but it's gonna actually be regression. And if we can make it through this, man, we have to make it through this, because again, this is just the beginning of we've seen the other rights that are being taken away. A woman's right to choose. Who has the right other than that woman herself than to say what she chooses to do with her body? Her and her doctor makes that choice.
Right.
If a person wants to live a LGBTQ lifestyle, who can tell them that they cannot? We as pastors, that's why, one of the main reasons that we are a Christian non-denominational church, because we say all are welcome. We will not deny anyone Jesus Christ because of whatever denominational bylaw that any kind of church allegiance or federation may have. You come to Christ. And that's why, again, man, getting back to this act itself and the people that are trying to invoke this act, they say they're Christian, but man, their hearts are saying otherwise. And the Bible tells us that we'll know them by their fruits. And of course, their fruits, nothing refer to material wealth, is referring to what they have done, what they have stood. What side of history are you on? Right. And again, it's like these people are going to be sitting up in churches saying hallelujah, hallelujah, but they have so much hate in their heart. And of course, we know 1 John 4:20 and 21 tells us plainly, you cannot say you love God and hate people. You can't.
Well, in judgment, so much judgment, right?
Exactly.
Judge not that ye be not judged. And I'm going to point,
and not judge. Right? What we're supposed to do. You said it.
I want to point out that what are the two commandments? Jesus himself. Okay, what are the commandments that he was asked? What are the most important commandments, Lord? Yep. He's talking about these in both, at least Matthew and Mark. And what does he say? He says, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. And the second is this. These are the two that matter. You should love your neighbor as yourself. So my biggest hope, the thing that counters my cynicism the most is that the people that are on the side of this are breaking rule number 1 and rule number 2. The two commandments that he called us to do more than anything else, because people are loving money. They're loving their own security. They're loving Trump. They're loving this, Republican strategy of, put America first, right? So we have our idols, right? You have your idols that you're placing above God. Because if you love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your mind and all your strength, I guarantee you take care of that first. You'll start seeing things in a different light. And if you love your neighbor as you love yourself, because, I feel so blessed. I have 2 neighbors, one across the street from me and one right to my left, that both have trans flags up right now. And I think to myself, God, thank you for putting me in a place where I get to love on these people without any sense of one has had a daughter that, biologically born daughter that now is his son, and went in another is a biological son that went to being their daughter. And they're so much happier after having done that. And then I look at things like the scientific research that's being done where it's not just X and Y. We've been trained that it's just X and Y. Do some research. It's actually XYY. There's XXY. So there are different combinations of that particular gene that gives some scientific credence for why these people feel. Why is this such a struggle? I myself grew up as a very emotional, passionate, have you figured that one out, kid that had balls whipped at my head when we would play bombardment by one kid in particular that just didn't like me because I guess I was too whatever. And he would throw balls at my head from 3 feet away and yell, faggot! Not a nice word, I know, sorry. But that's what he said. So loving thy Lord, thy God, love your neighbor. Man, if we would get that right, church, if we would get that right, think of how different the world would be, because we would be just letting the chaff burn away and focus on the real fruits of what we ought to be doing. And, I'm not blind enough to think that Christianity is the way that everybody has to go. I just want people to love one another. Beloved, let us love one another, for everyone that loves knows God and is born of God. So I keep coming to that, even with, those Buddhists and those, Confucianists and Muslims. Hey, I have met some of the most loving, wonderful people, friends that are Muslim belief system, religion, that I would walk through fire for those folks because they're so loving and compassionate and, so giving. You're gonna be the judge that sits back and says that, they're not getting to heaven because he said, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to God but through me. Well, how do you know that I am isn't I am as in God the Father, who is merciful and would have that no one would perish, but that everyone would have everlasting life? How do you reconcile that with your judgment that says, I'm the one keeping the register here, and I'm telling you, you ain't worth my time, boy, because you is a Muslim? I'm sorry, dude. We need to talk, because that is not the God of love. That is not the God that Jesus was incarnate as. That is not how he operates. Jesus came so all of that Old Testament judgment and stoning people because they ate, meat, whatever, that they, violated one of the dietary rules of Jewish law. All of that stuff was kind of put aside when Jesus came. And what is his ministry? Even Gandhi said, I love their Christ. I would follow their Christ. I'm not so sure about the Christians. And I'm paraphrasing, but that's his take on it was Jesus, thumbs up. Christians, not so much.
Not so much.
So we're running out of time, man. I'm sorry. I'm just going on and on. So
no, man. This is great and excellent. Of course, again, man. When you talked about those 2 commandments that the Lord gave us, love thy God with all thy heart, mind, soul, and strength, and then love thy neighbor as thyself. Now, again, when we start talking about loving thy neighbor as thyself, we have to take that first piece. Do we? Because a lot of people just don't love themselves, man, and it reflects in their behavior, and so for whatever a man thinketh in his heart, so is he in his behavior. And, and some of us, in society, with all the sensationalism of materialistic things, and it's like, the world is teaching people to hate themselves, man. If you don't meet this certain criteria, you don't fit in. If you think this way, you don't fit in.
Or you don't look this way, or even worse.
Exactly.
Right?
And that's why I say, man, the country has fallen under this really dark psychology of manipulation, blame shifting, gaslighting, and all those different things, man. But we have to get back to that very thing. Loving ourselves, of course, we, even the very first thing that God, when Jesus says, love thy God with all thy heart, mind, soul, and strength. We can't even love God unless we receive his love first. Yeah. When we can receive that we are loved by Jesus, then we can love God back, because we can't love unless we've been influenced by his love. That's the first thing, because that's where a lot of us fall short. We don't, the enemy will be in your ear with all kind of things. Hey, you did this, you thought that. You did this, you thought that. So that means you're not Christian. You live this way. You do this thing. You're not Christian. But the thing is, God loves us. Jesus loves us, and that's where we have to get to the point of really getting that first. That is the first hurdle that I'm in our ministry. When I'm talking to people, boots on the ground, they feel alone. They don't feel loved. They've been to churches. They're like, hey, I tried going to church. I tried religion. It didn't work. And I had to say, hey, did you go to church for this sensationalism? Did you go to church because this certain group of family and friends went to this church? Or did you go to see Jesus? Did you go to meet him personally? Did you go desiring and hungering for a relationship with Jesus? Because that's where we will fall short. If we're going to church just to check the box, we got it wrong. We got to be going to see him. And that's where a lot of us fall short, when we don't realize that God loves us. And then that allows the door to be open for things like this. Like, again, man, the SAVE Act, man, it's targeted racism, man. That's all it is. Of course, this just reflects the history of voter suppression. It's almost like a voter tax, because, again, all the documentation and all the hoops you got to go through to get the necessary documentation, you got to pay money to get all these different things. It's a voter tax, man. And also, the discrimination factor of it, man, it's just real. And again, this is just one of those many surface things that's going on.
Amen.
But there are so many effects underneath, and they affect us all.
So think about it, right? Think about what you can do. Let's anticipate, God help us, but let's anticipate that this thing does become law.
Yes.
Start strategizing. Don't wait for it to happen. Don't be reactive. Be proactive. That's why, like, the marches and stuff are proactive, right? So,
yes.
But they're also reactive. They wouldn't be happening if it wasn't for stuff that he's doing. So, strategy. There are better minds than mine that can figure out how to do these things. But we've got to figure out first, what's our agenda? What are we willing to go to the mat for?
Be on one accord. There you go, man.
Right,
you hit it on the head, man.
So anyway, we got to wrap this up, dude. You got DoorDashing to do, and I got a family that wants to go out for Easter brunch with not only tomorrow, but we got to do an Easter thing today too. Goodness sakes, we're celebrating this thing all weekend long. Oh yeah, that kind of seemed appropriate, doesn't it? Sorry, I couldn't help but joke. It may we're going to be coming back to this obviously in the next few weeks. We'll know if this passes or not. And but really seriously, folks, let's stop being reactive. Let's figure out a strategy for how are we going to dig out of this hole that is being dug for us, because there's been so much talk about the financial impact of tariffs. Again, I think that's a distraction too, because if we're going to, not love the Lord thy God as, with all our heart, all our mind, of course we're going to be sidetracked by that. If we're not going to love our neighbor as we love ourselves, we're going to be sidetracked by all of this, trans can't be, in the military. And, if you're going to, you can't use that she, them, him nonsense. It's just, your signature now. We get distracted by all that stuff rather than just saying, you know what, do whatever you want. I'm taking my high road, not only in not getting caught up in that nonsense and that crap that's coming out of your butthole, but I'm going to focus on things that are going to unify. Look at community things you can do. Look at, stuff you can do to embrace the people around you and make them feel like the space that you're in, wherever that may be, the neighborhood, the community, that it's a safe place for everyone. And that when people come, as they will, to try to make a stand of hatred and a stand of, these people are, they're angry about all kinds of things. And I'm not saying they don't have legitimate anger in some of what they're feeling. But the reality is they've lost track of the good that can be done by just being loving and compassionate and empathetic. Because when push comes to shove, when we're in a bad place, the people I remember the most are the ones that came to our rescue, that helped, that saw. They didn't judge me, they just helped. So be thinking about that. And we'll talk more, right? Dude, you're not going to not talk to me now, right? We're going to keep doing it.
Oh man, this is ongoing, man. People need to be informed. People need to be healed. They need to be made whole. They need to be educated. They need to know that there's people out here that's going to show empathy and compassion through education and understanding, man. So just the wheel's going to keep turning. So
if you got something you want to add to the discussion, www.forsauk, that's FORSAUK.com. We'd love to hear from you. Even if you're angry about stuff, but, just share it in a way that we can understand what really is coming at, and then be willing to discuss where you may be right. I'm willing to admit when people are right on, dead on, we did need to do something to cut back federal expense. I'm all for that. My biggest problem with it is I work in computers. I know that when you've got complex systems, you don't go at them with a hacksaw. You go at them first by understanding exactly where the things are problematic, and then understanding what's the best way to pare it down. Because I can't just rip circuit boards out of computers if they're not, working with the, the right program the right way. I got to figure out where that problem is and then figure out, do I have a device driver issue? Do I have a problem with, calls that are being made to the registry? Do I have a problem with a patch that needs to be applied? I mean, there's a lot more complexity to this situation than there is to the computers that I deal with on a daily basis. So, but I'm Rauel LaBreche, and you can disagree with me as much as you want on www.forsauk.com. I'm more than happy to admit when I'm wrong, and I hope that you'll be willing to do the same, or just say, hey, good job, guys. Appreciate it. Right? And who are you again, sir? I keep forgetting.
Antowan Hallmon Sr.
Oh yeah, okay. You're probably gonna say, will you stop asking me that? But I don't know how to say, dude. Whatever. Maybe we have to come up with a system where it's like, I'm Rauel LaBreche, and I'm Antowan. Now, we'll just get used to that kind of.
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
Yeah, we'll figure it out somewhere along the line.
Mm-hmm.
So thanks for joining us, folks. Really appreciate your time, and it's tell your friends, tell your family, tell your chickens, tell your dogs, tell whoever you need to tell to tune in and listen, please, and think about the things we're talking about. Okay? Right, dude?
All right, man.
All right, man. Take care, folks. Talk to you in a couple of weeks. We're doing on a bi-weekly schedule now, so we want to give you some time in between to decompress. Okay? Take care, y'all. Oh, sorry. I did not mean to do that. Dude, I hit the wrong button. Dude, I hit the wrong button. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off like that. But happy Easter. I wanted to say happy Easter and hope you guys have a fantastic time celebrating that he is risen. So